So today's video is going to look at our final market structure, which is monopolistic competition. Now, monopolistic competition is actually the most common market in America. The typical firm that you're going to see, the typical firm that you as a consumer are going to interact with is often a monopolistically competitive firm, okay? And the attributes are there are many sellers with free entry and free exit, okay? So many sellers, like perfect competition. Free entry and free exit, like perfect competition. The big difference, the key difference, is product differentiation. Okay? So the key to monopolistic competition is that the products have to be at least slightly different from one another. Okay? So there are many sellers competing for the same group of customers. Books, CDs, movies, computer games. Probably my favorite example, restaurants. Okay, blue jeans are another example I like to use for this, right? There are many different firms who are trying to get those customers. But each firm is producing a product that is at least a little bit different than its competitors. So because the products are all a little bit different from one another, instead of having a horizontal demand curve like in perfect competition where the firm is a price taker, each firm has a monopoly over their own particular brand, their own particular product. And as a consequence, they face a downward sloping demand curve. Now, another key feature is free entry and free exit. And as we saw in perfect competition, because of free entry and free exit, we end up with zero long run economic profit. Okay? Firms are going to enter and exit the market until profit ends up being driven to zero, or economic profit, I should say, ends up being driven to zero. Now, don't forget, if a firm is earning zero economic profit, what ends up happening is the firm can actually be making accounting profit. And that's why some firms will stay in business. So this is the typical monopolistic competitive firm in the short run. Now, the firm faces a downward sloping demand curve. Marginal revenue is less than demand. The firm produces where MR equals MC. They mark up the price, and they could possibly be earning positive economic profits. Now, a significant difference between monopolistic competition and monopoly, if you look here, my demand curve is really elastic. With a monopoly, my demand curve is usually, whoops, that's a P. My demand curve is unitary. And what that means is, is linear. What that means is the top portion is elastic, the middle portion is unit elastic, and the bottom portion is inelastic. But because there are so many substitutes, here, the demand curve is going to be more horizontal. My marginal revenue curve is never going to go negative. Okay, so it's a big difference. So we have a downward sloping demand curve. Marginal revenue is less than demand. The firm produces where MR equals MC. At this point, price is above average total cost, and the firm is earning positive economic profits. Okay, now sometimes monopolistically competitive firms might be losing money. It's going to be the same scenario. They're going to produce where MR equals MC. They're going to mark up the price. Only this time, price is lower than average total cost. Whoops. And the firm would be losing money. Now, in the presence of monopolistic competitive profits, what we would expect to happen is new firms are going to enter the market, and it's going to cause the demand for this firm's product to decrease. In the case of monopolistically competitive losses, we would expect new firms are going to enter the market. Existing firms are going to leave the market. Demand for our firm's product is going to increase because there's less competition, and we're going to end up at the monopolistically competitive firm's long-run equilibrium. Now, when it comes to drawing long-run equilibrium for monopolistic competition, here's the key. So you have your downward sloping demand curve. Marginal revenue is less than that. Marginal cost slopes up. They produce where MR equals MC. At that point, okay, at this point right here, it intersects or it runs tangent to ATC. However, the minimum of the ATC has to be where it intersects marginal cost. Okay, so this would be my efficient scale of the firm, right, where ATC is minimal. So you have to first draw demand, marginal revenue, marginal cost. Once you've done that, you find the profit maximizing quantity, and you go ahead and you draw your ATC tangent to it. Okay, so this is really kind of very important. That sometimes makes this a difficult graph to draw correctly. Now, there are two significant differences between monopolistic competition and monopoly. The first and perfect competition, excuse me. The first is excess capacity, and the second is markup. Okay, so monopolistic competition, they produce where MR equals MC. They charge a price higher than that. They mark up the price, and it causes dead weight loss, right? Okay, so like monopoly, there's dead weight loss. Another significant difference is we're not producing at the minimum of the ATC anymore, okay? And that's the idea. Excess capacity is the idea that we could increase the quantity. So this is the profit maximizing point. We could produce more and lower the cost, but the firm isn't going to do that simply because it doesn't maximize their profits. Their profits are maximized wherever MR equals MC. So from the economist's point of view, the perfectly competitive outcome is actually superior to the monopolistically competitive outcome because of this dead weight loss and because of the excess capacity. So now the question becomes, the firm is marking up the price, but it's not earning long-run economic profits, right? So where does that money end up going? And another key feature, So the monopolistically competitive firm doesn't have all of the desirable properties of perfect competition. There's the normal deadweight loss of monopoly. Unfortunately, or fortunately, if you're the firm, it's actually impossible for the government to regulate the monopolistically competitive firm simply because the number of firms in the market would make the task overwhelming. Another way monopolistically competitive firms might be inefficient is there could be too many firms, too much competition, or there could be too little competition. There's really no way to regulate the number of firms entering and exiting the market. Kind of like a great example of this is the market for cupcakes. Maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago, giant cupcakes were all the rage. And if you went into any major urban area like downtown Chicago, you would see a new cupcake shop opening up. More and more firms were opening up producing cupcakes. Well, the market was oversaturated, obviously, and most of those firms ended up going out of business and not being successful. There was actually too much entry into that market. Or, for example, when Walmart goes into a town and drives away competition, there might be too little entry. Okay, so it's hard to tell if we have the appropriate number of firms in a market. Now, a key feature of monopolistic competition, this is part of the reason why it's hard for monopolistically competitive firms to make a profit, is advertising. In order to differentiate the product, okay, in order to make their product appear to be different than the competitors, the firm has to advertise, okay? And the more they advertise, ideally, the more buyers they're going to get for their particular product. But the downside to the firm, the negative to the firm is advertising isn't free. So advertising increases your profit, but it also increases your cost, which gobbles up an increasing portion of your profit. So it kind of ends up being a self-fulfilling prophecy. You advertise because you want to make a profit, but the money that you spend advertising eats up the profit that you made. And the only person who ends up benefiting is the advertising agency. Now, the criticism of advertisement, and there's a lot to criticize about advertising. The primary criticism of advertising is it allows firms to mark up the price by manipulating people's tastes. Okay, and it makes people feel that products are more different than they actually are. So, for example, is a Honda Odyssey fundamentally different from a Toyota Sienna? Is I don't know, a hamburger from McDonald's fundamentally different from a hamburger from Burger King, let's say? Okay, they're both garbage. So really, the criticism is advertising is manipulative, right? That's the negative view of advertising. The defense of advertising is advertising provides information and actually increases competition. Advertising makes markets more competitive by providing information. This is particularly true when advertisers use prices. And there are some good examples of where advertising has increased competition. There's a great example of eyeglasses in your textbook. Another example where we've really seen this is the cost of life insurance in the United States has plummeted over the last 20 years, primarily since the invention of the internet, and people can comparison shop life insurance policies. It's really significantly dropped the prices. Now, another defense of advertising is advertising could actually be seen as a signal of quality. So a firm is only going to be willing to advertise a product that they actually believe in. And if they're going to spend the money to advertise, but people still aren't going to buy the product, they're going to go ahead and not advertise it. So if it's a really, really bad product, the firm isn't going to actually be willing to spend the money to advertise it. Now, there's a criticism of branding. Branding is the process of creating products and associate it with a particular company or store. And American companies are heavily branded. I'm sure you guys are all familiar with branding. And the criticism of branding is it promotes the perception of differences that don't really exist. However, there's also a defense of branding. The defense of using brand names is it provides us information about quality, and it also gives the firm an incentive to continue to try to maintain a high quality. So if a firm really builds up a reputation as being a high quality firm, a firm that produces things that are of high quality and generally well received in the market, they then have to continue to produce products that are at that level of quality, or the brand name might end up being a negative. So like, for example, Toyotas have a very good reputation for quality. If Toyotas started exploding and killing people, all of a sudden the brand name might be a little bit of an issue. So this kind of summarizes the different types of market structures. This is the three different imperfectly competitive markets. Three different market structures. Make sure you take a look at your textbook for this chapter. There are lots and lots of good information in there. It might show up on the quiz. Make sure that you also take a few minutes and work on your homework problems.